Settle in and let the lamp burn low. Tonight, I'll tell you of a man who conquered a whole world and then spent the rest of his life running from the one thing he could not defeat. He took 7 kingdoms that had torn each other apart for centuries and forged them into a single China, one land, one law, one written word that would endure 2,000 years. They called him Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. Before him, there had never been such a title, and after him, for 2 millennia, there was always one. He commanded 1,000,000 men. He raised a wall across the top of the world and buried an army of clay to guard him forever. Nothing living dared defy him. And yet, in the end, this master of all under heaven lay awake at night, trembling not at any enemy, but at a single ordinary thought that comes for every one of us, that he would die. This is the story of the man who conquered everything and feared only the dark. Sit back. Here is how it began. He was not born an emperor. He was born a hostage, or near enough. His name was Ying Zheng, and he came into the world in 259 BC in the city of a rival kingdom. In those days, China was not one country, but 7, locked in endless war, an age men would remember as the Warring States. And peace between kings was bought with children. His father was a minor Qin prince, sent to live in the enemy kingdom of Zhao as a hostage, a human pledge that Qin would keep the peace. It was a cold, precarious life. So the boy Zheng grew up a stranger in an enemy land, watched, resented, always a breath away from being killed if the war turned. He learned young that trust was a luxury he could not afford. It marks a man, a childhood like that, always the outsider, always in danger. Some it breaks. This one it forged into iron, suspicious and hard, and hungry for a power no one could ever take from him. Now the boy's rise began not with a sword, but with a merchant, the richest and cleverest in the land, a man named Lu Bue. Lu Bue looked at Zheng's exiled father, a forgotten hostage prince, and saw not a man, but an investment. This, he is said to have murmured, is rare goods worth hoarding. With his fortune, the merchant bought and bribed and schemed, and against all odds, pushed the forgotten prince onto the throne of mighty Qin itself. So the hostage's son became heir to the most powerful kingdom in China, and whispers followed him all his life that his true father was not the prince at all, but Lu Bue the merchant. We will never know. Then, when Zheng was just 13, his father died, and a boy became king of Qin, with the merchant Lu Bue ruling at his shoulder as regent, and the whole machine of the Qin state in his small hands. You must understand what Qin was, for it made him. Of all the 7 kingdoms, Qin was the hardest, the most ruthless, a state built for one purpose only, total war. Long before Zheng, Qin had embraced a harsh philosophy called legalism. It held that men are not good and must be ruled not by kindness, but by strict law, harsh punishment, and rich reward. In Qin, a farmer rose by growing grain, and a soldier rose by taking heads in battle, one rank for every enemy killed. Birth meant nothing, only usefulness to the state. It was cruel, and it was terrifyingly effective. Qin had become less a country than a weapon, a vast machine for making soldiers and swallowing land. And young Zheng was learning to hold its handle. But a boy king with a regent is not truly king. As Zheng grew, the merchant Lu Bue still held the real power, and a dangerous scandal was brewing in the palace behind him. A plot against the throne erupted. A favorite of the court raised soldiers and tried to seize power. Zheng, now a young man, crushed it without mercy and wiped out everyone involved. Then he turned on the merchant who had made his family. He stripped Lu Bue of all his power and sent him into exile. And the man who had gambled everything on a boy, seeing his ruin, drank poison and died. Zheng was now sole master of Qin, beholden to no regent, no merchant, no man. He was in his early 20s, cold, brilliant, and utterly alone at the top. And he had one ambition, all of it. Now began the work that would make him immortal or infamous. One by one, he set out to devour the other 6 kingdoms and end 500 years of war forever. He had the perfect chancellor for it, a coldly brilliant man named Lai Si, who shared his vision of one iron empire and would serve him faithfully to the very end and beyond. Their strategy was patient and merciless: befriend the far kingdoms, bribe their ministers to treachery, and crush the near ones with overwhelming force. Divide, corrupt, and devour. Kingdom of Han fell first. Then mighty Zhao, the land of his own bitter childhood, was broken and swallowed. Then Wei, the map of China, was turning black with Qin. The great southern kingdom of Chu resisted with everything it had, and it cost Qin, its largest army ever raised, 600,000 men, before it too went down. Nothing could stand. The kingdoms could not stop him with armies, so one of them, desperate Yan, tried to stop him with a single knife. It is the most famous assassination in all Chinese history. They sent a lone assassin, a quiet, resolute man named Jing Qi, bearing gifts for the king of Qin, a map of surrendered land, and inside the rolled map, a poisoned blade. As the map unrolled before the king, it revealed its secret, the dagger. Jing Qi lunged, and the king of Qin, caught unarmed, ran for his life around his own throne pillar as courtiers watched frozen in terror. His great sword was too long to draw in panic. Only when a servant screamed at him to sling it across his back could he finally pull it free and cut the assassin down. He survived, but something in him did not. From that day the fear took root, the knowledge that any hand, any gift, any shadow might carry his death, and the fear would only grow. Yan fell for its insolence, and in the year 221 BC, the last kingdom, Kai, surrendered without a fight. For the first time in history, all of China lay under one man's hand. A king was no longer title enough. He declared that he was something new under heaven and took a name never used before, Huangdi, emperor, and he was the first of them, Shi Huangdi. He decreed that his line would rule for 10,000 generations, he the first emperor, his son the second, on and on forever. He believed he had founded an eternal dynasty. He was, at that moment, perhaps the most powerful human being who had ever lived, and he was only 38 years old. And now came his true genius, not conquest, but what he did with it. For he saw that swords could take a land, but only rules could hold it. So he set about making the many into one. The 7 kingdoms had used 7 scripts, 7 coins, 7 sets of weights, even different widths of cart. Trade and rule were chaos. He swept it all away. One written script for all China, so a man in the north could read a man in the south. That single act would bind the Chinese people together for 2,000 years, longer than any wall. One currency, one system of weights and measures, one width for every axle, so carts ran in the same ruts on every road. He standardized the very grooves of the earth. He drove great roads across the empire, straight as spears, so his armies and couriers could reach any corner in days. He was not just ruling China, he was wiring it together into one body. But such unity was not gently won. To bind the empire, he had to break the old world utterly, and he did it with the cold iron of legalism. He tore the old noble families from their lands and forced 100,000 of the mightiest households to move to his capital, where he could watch them, powerless, under his eye. He gathered the weapons of the conquered kingdoms, swords, spears, halberds by the ton, melted them down, and cast them into 12 giant bronze statues, so no rebel could ever arm again. His laws reached into every life. Punishments were savage, watchmen everywhere, neighbors made to inform on neighbors. It was order, yes, the terrible order of a single will pressing down on millions. Beyond his northern border rode the horse peoples of the steppe, raiders his settled empire could never truly catch. So he decided to shut them out with a wall across the top of the world. He linked and extended the old border walls of the fallen kingdoms into one immense barrier winding for thousands of miles over mountain and desert. An early ancestor of the Great Wall of China. Hundreds of thousands of conscripts and convicts were driven to build it, laboring, freezing, starving in the wild north. Countless thousands died and were buried where they fell. They say the wall was mortared with the bones of the dead. It kept the empire safe, but the people began to whisper that their emperor built glory upon a mountain of their suffering. The first emperor could conquer land and standardize coins, but there was one thing he could not abide: men who thought differently and remembered a world before him. The scholars praised the old ways, the old kings, and dared to criticize his harsh new order. So Lai Si, the chancellor, proposed a monstrous remedy: erase the past itself. By imperial decree, the histories and philosophies of the old kingdoms were gathered up and burned. Whole libraries of a civilization's memory rose into the sky as smoke and ash. And when scholars protested, the histories tell a darker tale still, that hundreds of them were rounded up and buried alive, a warning to any who would question the emperor's truth. He had unified the writing of China and then tried to burn away everything written before him. He wanted a world that began with him and remembered nothing else. He had it all now: the land, the law, the wall, the silence. He should have been the most contented man alive. Instead, he became the most frightened. He had survived the assassin's dagger and more plots after. Now he trusted no one. He built covered walkways between his palaces so that no one might see where the emperor slept on any given night. He had more palaces than there were nights in the year and moved between them like a ghost, never sleeping twice in the same bed. The master of all China had become a prisoner of his own dread, for he had conquered every enemy of flesh. But now he faced the one enemy no army, no wall, no law could stop. And slowly, it became the only thing he thought about. He would grow old, he would die. And so the conqueror declared war on death itself. If no man had ever escaped it, then he, the first emperor, unlike all men, would be the first. Alchemists and sorcerers flocked to his court, promising the impossible: an elixir of immortality, a potion to make him live forever. And the emperor, desperate, believed them. One of them, a bold magician named Zhu Fu, told of 3 sacred islands far out in the eastern sea, where immortals lived and the elixir grew. The emperor gave him a fleet and thousands of young people to find it. Zhu Fu sailed east into the rising sun and was never seen in China again. Some say he found nothing and dared not return. Some say he found new lands and simply stayed. The emperor waited in vain. Others fed him elixirs of cinnabar and jade, potions rich in mercury, which the ancients thought the metal of eternal life. Day by day, the emperor drank the very poison that was killing him. He chased life above ground, but below it, he was preparing for the opposite: a tomb so vast it would be a whole empire of the dead to serve him for eternity. For 36 years, 700,000 laborers dug and built beneath Mount Lai, a subterranean palace, its ceiling set with pearls for stars, its floor carved with rivers of flowing mercury for seas. And to guard him forever, he ordered an army not of living men, but of clay. Thousands upon thousands of life-sized warriors, each with a different face, standing in eternal ranks. Foot soldiers, archers, charioteers, generals, a whole army sculpted from earth and fired hard, buried in battle order to march with their emperor into the world beyond. No ruler had ever dreamed such a thing. He was building 2 futures at once, grasping for a life without end above the earth, and preparing a kingdom of the dead below it. He was hedging against his own terror, and the terror was winning. He could not rest. He roamed his empire on great inspection tours, climbing sacred mountains, carving his glory into stone, and always seeking word of the elixir that never came. In the year 210 BC, far from home on such a tour, in the summer heat, the first emperor fell gravely ill. The master of all under heaven was dying on a dusty road, hundreds of miles from his capital. And there, in that carriage, the man who had chased immortality across the sea and into 1,000 cauldrons finally met the enemy he could not conquer. He was 49 years old. Now here is the strange, dark end to it. The emperor died far from home, and his death, he who feared it so, became a secret used by lesser men. 2 men rode with the corpse, the Chancellor Lai Si and a cunning court official named Zhao Gao. They knew that if the emperor's death was known, the empire might fly apart before they reached the capital. So they hid it. They kept the dead emperor's carriage rolling as if he lived, brought meals to the curtains, and let officials report to a corpse. It was high summer, and the body began to stink. And to hide the smell of the rotting emperor from the procession, they loaded a cart with baskets of salted fish and set it beside his carriage, so that the greatest man in the world traveled home cloaked in the reek of rotten fish. Behind the curtains, they forged his final orders. They set aside his rightful heir, forced that honest son to take his own life, and placed a weak, pliable prince on the throne, a puppet they could rule. So the first emperor was buried at last in his vast tomb beneath Mount Lai, his clay army standing guard, his mercury rivers gleaming in the dark. They sealed the workmen inside with him to keep its secrets. He had dreamed of a dynasty of 10,000 generations. It did not last 10,000 days. The weak heir and the scheming court could not hold what the Iron Emperor had held. The people, ground down by taxes and forced labor and savage law, had endured only because they feared him. With him gone, the fear broke, and all across China they rose. Rebellion swept the land like fire through dry grass. Within just 4 years of the first emperor's death, his eternal dynasty was in ashes, and the mighty state of Qin was gone. So was it all for nothing? The wall, the burning, the fear, the fish, the tomb, a monstrous life, ending in ruin within a handful of years. It would be easy to say so, but it would be wrong. For though his dynasty died, his China did not. The one script, the one measure, the one road, the one idea, that these many lands were a single civilization that survived him and every dynasty after. For 2,000 years, whenever China broke apart, it remembered that it was meant to be whole, because one hard, frightened man had first made it so. His shadow lies over China to this very day. And in 1974, more than 2,000 years after he died, farmers digging a well near Mount Lai struck something in the earth, the head of a clay soldier. His buried army had been found at last, and they still stand there today, thousands of them, silent in their ranks, faces turned toward an emperor 2,000 years gone, the army that guards a man who never stopped fearing the dark. He conquered everything a man can conquer and feared the one thing every man must face. Remember him and be gentle with yourself. Even the first emperor was only mortal. Sleep now and rest easy.